1 in 3. That's how many American men will face physical violence, sexual assault, or stalking by an intimate partner. 1 in 3 women worldwide will endure physical or sexual abuse, most often by someone they know. But domestic abuse isn't just bruises. It's manipulation, it's fear, it's control that seeps into every part of your life. I'm Ingrid Dutton, and I survived it. Then I created 1 in 3 so no one else has to suffer in silence. Each week, we break that silence together. Occasionally joined by survivors, loved ones, and experts, we talk about the pain, yes, but also about the healing, resilience, and the fight to reclaim your life. This podcast is more than awareness, it's a lifeline. And a reminder, you are seen, you are heard, you are never alone. Search for 1 in 3 wherever you get your podcasts, because every voice matters and every story deserves to be heard. Quote, as people retire from here and go away and new people come in, it becomes more of a memory and less of a reality, I guess. It will always be a reality for those who lived through it, but it becomes a less spoken about memory those left behind don't discuss, because those who didn't experience it can't really understand, which is happy, but sad because it was such an impactful time, such an influential time in all of our lives. End quote. Donna Downs, Associate Professor of Communication at the University of Taylor. You look confused.
Perplexed is how I prefer to say it.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that I tried to come up with a theme.
Hi, Ingrid.
Oh, hi. Hi. Hey there. Hi there. Ho there.
Ho there.
Jessica.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another situation.
Welcome. And I'm just going to really jump in, I guess.
Apparently. So jump right away because I am perplexed.
Well, and because it's my birthday month and I can do what I want.
It's my party and I'll cry if I want to.
So for my birthday month, which I actually didn't tell you for my birthday month, I wanted to do this. I wanted to do a theme for this month of mistaken identity, but Jessica decided to do Mardi Gras last week. But maybe for the rest of this month, we can do cases of mistaken identity.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, and the reason I wanted to do this is I don't know why I started thinking about it, but for some reason throughout my life, everybody always thinks they know me. And so remember when we were in California recently at the one wine tasting, the guy thought he knew me. And my favorite case of mistaken identity with me is, and I'm not sure if we've ever told this story on our podcast before, but when we were in our 20s, maybe, Jessica and I were at a club in Orlando. And there was this guy that just was sporadically throughout the club and would just stand there and just be looking at us with this really weird smile on his face. Do you remember this at all?
No, not at all.
You're going to when I get there. And I remember he was kind of like creeping us out a bit. And finally, I don't know if you said something to him or if and he would always stand at a distance. He wouldn't come up to us. And
super creepy.
Yes. And I don't remember if you said something to him or if he finally said something to us. But he said, "You know who I am." And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, I'm your biggest client. Like I'm always in. And I said, "What do you mean you're my biggest client?" And he said, "Rachel's." And do you remember this now?
I do.
You busted out. So Rachel's is a strip club in Orlando. And he thought I was a stripper. And you were dying. You're like, "You think my sister's a stripper?" Because I'm like the furthest thing from that. But Yeah. So I don't know why I was thinking about the California thing. Then I thought about him, and there was one other funny, and now I can't think of it. But when I was a brand new nurse, I got it all the time from patients and patients' family members. They're like, you look just like my neighbor, my niece, whomever. Everybody always thought they knew who I was. So, I mean, I know everyone supposedly has a doppelganger, but I probably have 100 apparently. And so I just was wondering if there's any, famous cases of mistaken identity. And I Googled it. Yeah, I Googled this a couple months ago, and I found some that were really interesting that happened like ages and ages ago. And so I thought, well, let's do this for March. And so I Googled it again, and I came upon, I don't know how this story didn't come up the first time I Googled. So anyway, I came upon the story I'm about to tell you.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
The only thing people, I remember after I gave birth to my son and I went out with a girlfriend for a drink for my first time, someone said I looked like Meghan Markle. That was the closest. Otherwise, I think I do get the, have I met you before?
I
Usually
can see
from
that.
older people.
I can see, what's her name? Punky Brewster. She has a cool name. Oh my gosh. What is her name? Have you ever gotten anybody else?
In Hawaii, I got Jennifer Garner one time. Yeah, I didn't see that
awesome.
One. Yeah, I was never offended by anything. I was never called someone thought I was a stripper. And that has not happened.
Once again, I'm going to emphasize that's when I was in my 20s as well. So I was more likely to have perhaps the physique of a stripper than I do now. All right, now that we did all that. So let me get into the story.
Okay, I'll mute.
All right. Named after Bishop William Taylor, Taylor University is located in Upland, Indiana. We have some great listeners in Indiana. It was founded in 1846 and is one of the oldest evangelical Christian universities in the United States. On Wednesday, April 26, 2006, the school was preparing for the inauguration of its new president, Dr. Eugene B. Habaker. Students and faculty were excitedly setting up for a banquet at the campus in Fort Wayne in anticipation for the next day's activities. Following the prep work, 2 vans began the trek back to the Upland campus. Let's see, and they were traveling along I-69. Around 8 p.m., they were approximately 10 miles away from their destination when a semi-truck, whose driver had fallen asleep, crossed the median and struck one of the southbound vans. The van was carrying 9 passengers. 4 of the 5 students were killed, along with one of the 4 employees. Vicky Rhodes and Connie Majors were listed to be in stable condition the following day at Marion General Hospital. Michelle Miller was deemed to be in fair condition as she and only surviving student Laura Van Ryn were airlifted to Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne. According to State Police Sergeant Robert Popplewell, the side of the van had been peeled open by the collision, which ejected several of the passengers. Laura was one of those passengers and was reported to have been thrown approximately 50 feet. First responders acted quickly in getting her to a trauma center.
That is so sad.
It's very sad. And I forgot to cite my sources. So quickly, there's just a teeny tiny bit of information on Wikipedia. I'm not even sure I used any of that information. But I also got information from the Indy Star, wave3.com, tayloruniversity.edu, and a book I will name at the end of the episode because I'm going to try to not give too much away. Let's see. In Gaylord, Michigan, Colleen Serac received a call that evening. The Grant County chaplain explained how Whitney was in a tragic accident and was pronounced dead at the scene. Her husband, Newell, was in Mississippi working with Habitat for Humanity. She had to make the call to her husband, in which she could just mutter, "I'm sorry." Unable to call their only surviving daughter, Carly, family friend Jim Mathis made the call. Carly, Whitney's older sister and Taylor University student, was anticipating an update as she already knew about the accident and that her little sister was part of the prep crew in Fort Wayne. As soon as she picked up the call, she heard crying in the background. She knew the reason for the call before he was able to speak a word. Carly had traveled the 15 miles from Taylor University's campus to Marion General Hospital after her boyfriend had told her about the accident. It was there she waited along with other students in the hospital chapel, waiting for updates. Colleen and Jim traveled to Marion General because she wanted to go to the hospital her daughter was brought to. Staff explained her daughter had already been identified, but she would be able to see Whitney if she wanted. Colleen decided that night she wanted to remember Whitney in life and declined the offer. In fact, the Seracs made the final decision that none of them would view Whitney before her burial.
Who decided that?
The Seracs. That's her last name.
What is that?
That's her last name. Seracs.
Okay.
Is Cerak. Newell landed in Indianapolis the next afternoon. The family immediately began taking care of business. They cleaned out their daughter's dorm room, and on their drive home, they wrote out Whitney's obituary and planned for her funeral to be held that Sunday. The viewing would be held on what would have been Whitney's 19th birthday. When the Seracs arrived home, they found drinks piled up outside, a newly delivered refrigerator stuffed with meals, flowers overflowing throughout the house, and an answering machine full of condolences.
Ooh, that made my eyes water.
April 30th was Whitney's funeral, and there were around 1,400 people in the church, with more overflowing outside of the church in attendance. Susie Van Ryn also received a call around 10 p.m. that Wednesday evening. The call came from the chaplain at Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne. He explained Laura had been brought to their hospital following a tragic car accident. The youngest of their 4 children had multiple broken bones and a head injury. She was in the ICU as she was unconscious and in stable yet critical condition. As Susie, her husband Don, and their daughter Lisa immediately drove to Fort Wayne, the hospital called asking for permission to insert an intracranial pressure catheter through her skull. That was one of the many decisions her parents would have to make regarding her hospital care. The family arrived to the hospital around 1:15 a.m. They were greeted by several students from Taylor University. When they were able to see Laura, her face was swollen, cut, and bruised, but her blonde hair stuck out from all the tubes. She had IVs and multiple lines monitoring her. She had been intubated as well. The hospital staff brought in Laura's belongings. The family did not recognize her shoes or clothes, chalking that up to she always borrows everybody else's clothes. And they most likely belonged to her roommates. However, they did recognize her purse. Apparently, paramedics were able to identify her by her purse and its contents as it was found laying next to her. Her 2 older brothers, boyfriend, and her boyfriend's family also eventually arrived. Medical staff explained her situation was somewhat unclear. They were not able to yet determine the amount of brain injury she had. They stated Laura, or their sunshine girl, as they called her, would have a lengthy recovery process if she did indeed recover. There would be signs of improvement along with potential setbacks. Over the course of the next few weeks, the Van Ryn family, along with her boyfriend Aaron, did not leave Laura's side. This is where the family notes incredible support. A stranger had visited them in the waiting room of the ICU and provided pizza for the entire family and anyone else in the waiting room. A hospital chaplain informed them of a nearby house that was dedicated by a local church to family members of hospital patients. The house, along with meals, would be available to them free of charge. Visitors continued to fill the waiting room every week. Some of those visitors would even stop by the Van Ryn house to grab any clothes or supplies for the family. Because when the family left their house, they had no idea that they would not be returning home for weeks. There were so many people who were praying for Laura, so many people who wanted updates on how she was doing. Lisa, so that's Laura's sister again, began to send an email to those she was aware of. Those emails would get forwarded to even more people. She had a difficult time keeping up with all the addresses. So this email would get sent out and she'd get more replies like, please add me to this list. Please add me to this list. So at the encouragement of a friend, she decided to start a blog. And her first blog entry was on Friday, April 28th. That blog was initially read by family and friends. It spread throughout the Taylor University campus. It went beyond Michigan and Indiana. It went beyond the United States. And they were getting notes and comments from people. I know they mentioned the Philippines and they mentioned Germany. Lisa and the other Van Ryns decided to not only provide updates on Laura, but they also wanted to reveal God's work and love through this blog. As Laura's progress improved, the family noticed a few strange things. Lisa and one of her brothers noticed that her teeth looked a little bit pushed up, and they assumed that must have happened from the impact of being thrown 50 feet. Another day, Lisa and Susie, so Lisa again's a sister, Susie's a mom, noticed what looked like a hole from a navel piercing. They just kind of chuckled and said, oh, she turns 21 years old and decides to go out and do all these things without letting us know. But they were never aware that she had actually done it. Laura continued to improve. Her tubes were slowly removed. She started physical therapy. They would sit her up in the chair. And eventually they said, you know what, she can be transferred to more of a rehabilitatory hospital in Grand Rapids. So on May 18th, they made that transfer from Fort Wayne to Grand Rapids. And this was the first time the family had gone home since the accident. And on their way home, they were thinking, oh my gosh, the lawn must be completely overgrown. What kind of disarray is our house in? When they arrived home, the lawn was mowed. And Dawn had asked one of the neighbors who took care of this, and the neighbor said, oh, we all did. We knew that you wouldn't want to come home to an overgrown lawn. They went inside. The house was spotlessly cleaned. The cabinets and the refrigerator were completely stocked with food and supplies, and there were fresh cookies that were baked and set on the counter.
Oh my goodness, these neighbors are amazing.
Yeah, the whole community. So the name of the hospital that she was moved to is Spectrum. So while at Spectrum, she began to move more. She began speaking little one words and then maybe 2 or 3 words put together for a sentence. She started opening her eyes more. And at one point while she was there, she called Lisa Carly. On May 26th, during speech therapy, the therapist had asked her what her name was, and she said Whitney. On May 27th, her boyfriend, long-term boyfriend, so this boyfriend was planning on proposing to her at graduation, and Laura was about to graduate in like 3 weeks. So he had come into the room, and she's like, give me a kiss, Hunter. And he looked around, and he's like, who's Hunter? And everyone's like, we don't know who Hunter is. On May 29th, occupational therapy, while they were asking her to draw a lot of pictures, they decided to step it up a little bit and said, write down your name. And her dad was in the therapy room with them. And she continues to do so. And as they conclude the therapy session, her dad went to take her back to the room. The therapist said, hey, look at this, when I asked her to write down her name. And she said, are you sure that's your name? And Laura nodded yes. Well, when they looked at the piece of paper, it said Whitney. The speech therapist admitted that she often would say her name was Whitney during her sessions. But when the family asked the hospital staff about this, they said, why is she doing this? Why is she saying different names? It doesn't make sense. And they said that as she healed, she might have neural misfires. And the reason Whitney's name probably kept coming up is because she most likely was sitting next to Whitney in the accident. And perhaps Whitney was the last person she spoke with before the accident. So that day, as Dawn was wheeling her back to her room, all of a sudden Laura said, false parents. And Dawn had to lean down and he's like, what did you just say? And she said, false parents. And he said, false parents? He's like, we're your false parents, the ones that have been by your side every single day for the last 5 weeks. And he just chuckled. So when he got back to the room, Aaron was there, and Aaron took her out for a little stroll. And Dawn met up with a few family friends in the cafeteria who wanted to see Laura. When Aaron wheeled up, the family friends got really quiet and didn't really say much, and they eventually left. Well, Dawn had spoken to Lisa about the earlier day's events and said, you know, it's really strange. She wrote down her name was Whitney. She said false parents to me. And then Lisa said, well, what if this isn't Laura? And her dad was like, what are you talking about? Of course it's Laura. Well, when she got home, she searched through the kitchen because they had received a CD from Taylor University as a memorial of all the students and staff that were killed in the car accident. And she found the CD and she looked at the photo and she's like, wow, she actually kind of looks like Whitney. And so she went to bed that night wondering, is that really Laura in the hospital? So the next morning, her dad came downstairs and she said, what if that's not Laura? What if it is Whitney? And he said, no, it's definitely Laura. So they started driving to Spectrum, and they didn't talk anymore about it. When they got there, the gentleman that had been visiting the night before was there and asked to speak with Dawn. And Lisa went in to be in attendance for Laura's therapy session that day. That family friend had told Dawn, that's not Laura. And they were concerned about it. Meanwhile, Lisa sat through the therapy session and she wheeled Whitney back to her room after the session completed. And she leaned down and she said, what's your name? And the girl said, Whitney. And Lisa looked at her and she said, great, good job. That's right. Who are your parents? And the girl said, the Siraks. And Lisa said, what are your parents' first names? And she said, Newell and Colleen. And so Lisa took her back to her room. Her dad met her there and told her of the conversation that he had with a family friend. And Lisa informed him of the conversation she just had with the girl in the hospital. And they looked at each other and they said, well, that's that then. So they went to hospital administration and said, we are concerned that this actually may not be Laura. There are too many weird things happening. And there's no reason that Laura would actually know the first name of Whitney's parents. Because while they were acquaintances, they weren't actually friends. So Dawn and Lisa, along with hospital administration, decided that in order to verify this was Laura, they were going to have the dental records checked and compared. So they received the dental records, sent them to hospital administration. Dawn went back to the house along with Lisa and spoke with Susie. So they called the 2 older boys over to the house and explained to them that we don't think this is Laura. They're checking dental records. And the boys were confused and said, well, is there any chance that the dental records will prove that this is Laura? And Dawn said they could, but no, we're pretty confident that this is not Laura. So on May 31st, around 2 a.m., the Grant County coroner called Colleen Sirak. When she answered the phone, she was really confused because why would the coroner be calling her again? And he said the hospital chaplain was also on the line, and he asked if there was anyone else in the house. And Carly was home. So she ran up the stairs, threw a cordless phone at Carly and said, get on the phone. The coroner's on the phone. You need to hear this as well. So the coroner proceeded to tell them, we think Whitney is alive. And Colleen's first thought was, no, she was dead when we buried her, because she thought at first maybe he was implying that they had buried her alive. And he explained, no, we think there was a mix-up in the identification process. And hearing this, Carly got pissed because she's like, who would like call with this horrible prank? And once again, Newell was out of town. This time he was in New York or New Jersey with a senior class trip. And so they contacted him. They contacted their friend Jim, who came over, and they made the drive to Spectrum in Grand Rapids. And when Carly and Colleen walked into the room, they knew immediately that it was Whitney. She kept asking for her dad. Where's my dad? Get him here. Get him here. And when he finally came walking into the room, she sat up and stretched out her arms. And he came up and he gave her a hug. And she said, let's go home.
Lots of sniffles going on over here.
Keep yourself on mute. As she continued to progress, she began to ask for Hunter. I want Hunter. Bring him here now. And her dad kept saying, we're trying to make arrangements. We'll get him here when we can. And finally, one day, their dog came loping into the room and gave her tons of kisses. And she gave him a hug and said, Hunter. And he laid down next to her. So that's who Hunter was. The Siraks and the Van Ryns met each other. And Colleen Sirak was very nervous because she kept thinking our happiness is their devastation. But the Van Ryns were so gracious and said how happy they were for the Siraks. There were 2,000 people in attendance of Laura's memorial. She was exhumed from Gaylord and was brought to Caledonia to be laid to rest. On June 7th, the Van Ryns entered their final blog entry, but the Siraks took over and continued posting updates. In August of 2006, Whitney returned to Taylor University, and she had been tested. They continued to test her psychological progress, and she was at an 8th grade level when she returned back to college. She had a difficult time adjusting because her personality had changed and she still had a little bit of a slower neural connection. And in November, just before she came home for Thanksgiving break, they did another test and she was at a sophomore level in college.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a huge improvement.
Huge, huge. She was very persistent and very dedicated and very strong. So Whitney is now married to her boyfriend, Matt. I think they may have been friends. No, they were friends for a long time, but they had started dating before the accident. So now they're married. They have 3 children. The oldest child's name is Zachary, which means the Lord remembers you. Lisa, Laura's sister, went back to school to become a physical therapist because of all of the time she spent in the hospital. She became really interested in that. If you drive along I-69 from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Upland, Indiana, you may notice 5 crosses along the side of the road, which is just a few miles from the Marion exit, which was erected by students and faculty of Taylor University. This incident would later prompt Indiana lawmakers to enact stricter guidelines regarding identification of victims of fatal crashes. There's also more cable barriers along interstate medians. And the driver of the semi, I'm not going to name his name because the purpose of this is not to, blame, but his name is out there. He was later arrested on 5 counts of reckless homicide. And they were able to see that he had falsified his time logs and he had been on the road for 9 hours longer than the federal law allows. And he pleaded guilty and he ended up serving 2 years out of a 4-year sentence. So the source that I didn't name at the beginning is a book called Mistaken Identity, 2 Families, 1 Survivor, Unwavering Hope. And it was written by Dawn and Susie Van Ryn, as well as Newell, Colleen, and Whitney Sirak.
Dang. Chills again.
The book, which I actually listened to instead of reading, which is, I think that might be the first time I've ever done that. And the narrator was great. I mean, she had a very pleasant voice to listen to, and she did a really lovely job. The purpose of them writing the book was not necessarily to share the guts of the story, but was to share their love for God. And so throughout it has scripture verses, and it entails how each family member would pray to God for strength, and how throughout all of this, none of them ever wavered from their faith with God, but found strength through God to get them through each of these obstacles, hurdles. I'm not really sure what you would call that. And that's my first case of mistaken identity. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And if you look at their photos, there are some similarities. I mean, if they were both standing side by side, you wouldn't mistake them for each other. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there was obviously question, like, how did the Van Ryns, how did her boyfriend not know it was her? But again, they kept thinking she was thrown 50 yards or 50 feet. Mm-hmm. She was thrown 50 feet. And, you know, the hospital staff kept reinforcing things, and things were excusable. You could kind of explain away. Again, she borrowed other roommates' clothes, or, you know, she was 21. She could have gotten her navel pierced without anybody knowing. 2016, Taylor had a memorial service. Taylor University had a memorial service in which they invited Whitney Serac to speak at. And you can find her speech probably on YouTube. I listened to part of it. It's around 40 minutes, I think.
Good job, Ing.
Thanks.
I could see if me and you were ever in a car accident together, they might get us confused.
Yeah.
Our face was all, yeah. Oh, wait, except I have tattoos and you don't. So maybe not. Identifiable information.
And I would still probably be talking. Somehow.
Zombie. So bees?
Oh, yeah. So anyway, what I was going to tell you, if you cried through this, if you listen to, I don't know if it would be as emotional if you read it, but hearing somebody kind of read through this book, it's very emotional, especially the beginning. It's crazy. I would listen to it when I'd be on the treadmill, and I would be on the treadmill just crying.
I don't know if I want to put myself through that, but it's good to know the story.
It was a good book. It's a good book. Mm-hmm. Okay. So bees.
Be a good neighbor.
I'm going to say be a believer.
Don't be a sleepy driver. Being tired and while you drive is just as bad as being intoxicated while you drive.
Don't be too caught up in life that you don't appreciate the time you have with your loved ones.
Yeah.
Not that any of them were. I think they were all very involved and loving.
Mm-hmm. Don't be wasteful with your time, with your family and loved ones.
Ooh, that's better. That. Okay, so next week you will have a
mistaken identity. Okay.
Okay. And
then happy times.
And I will wrap up the month with a mistaken identity.
Sounds good. Who are you? Who?
Oh boy. Okay, on that note, bye.
Bye. If you would like to reach out to us or submit your situation, please contact us at anothersituationpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at Another Situation Podcast. We're also on Facebook at Another Situation.
Another Situation is produced and edited by Point 5 Pinoy. Music is written and performed by Tim Crow.